Board with David Coulthard, who was also putting in a great performance today as well for McLaren Mercedes. He'd ended up 10th fastest after the morning session, but soon dialing himself and the car in to suit the vagaries of this circuit. On a high, of course, after leading the last Grand Prix in Imola. A superb performance after another brilliant start. We've seen two brilliant starts in a row from the Scotsman. The Nürburgring and Imola both saw him shooting towards the front, and of course it worked perfectly in Italy with him taking the lead and leading for the first 19 laps of the race before the first round of pit stops started. Unfortunately, he was to go out of the race with hydraulic problems in the end, but nonetheless that sort of boost to a team is just what's required, and that momentum can then continue into the next race, and that seemed to be what's happening today with both of the McLarens well on the pace. Going up to 6th fastest at this point in the session, and there would be further improvements from Coulthard later on. Both partners in the team, McLaren and Mercedes, working hard to improve the package, and indeed a different spec engine is expected to be used on Saturday for the qualifying, perhaps to drag just that fraction more out of the cars. And bearing in mind just how close the grid has been in the last couple of Grand Prix, that really could make a big difference here. More problems down at the Rascasse once again, and this time for the other footwork, heart of Ricardo Rosset, but he'd fortunately managed to keep it out of the barrier. David Coulthard coming around to see the yellow flags from that incident. In fact, the car being cleared away very quickly, and the yellow flags not having to stay out for very long at all. A look back at what happened to Ricardo Rosset, and once again a similar sort of spin as we'd seen, but a slightly slower speed than his teammate Jos Verstappen, and therefore he didn't make contact with the barrier. We asked him about the spin later on.
A lot of people spun there, and when I was there watching, a lot of people almost hit the wall. The thing is, there is very quick in, and you're braking and turning at the same time. There is a bump, and once you hit the bump, sometimes the car just oversteers and it spins. I was very lucky not to hit the wall, so the car is not damaged. But when I was there watching, when I went out, a lot of people had big moments.
So Rosset was slowest today, but inside the 107% rule and still getting to grips with the circuit, still learning his way around. Well, David Coulthard, another quick time from him towards the latter part of this session. This time itself not his best, but he would later on put in another quick one and would end up this afternoon's session 3rd fastest, having completed all of his 30 laps, and no reliability problems at all for either of the McLarens today. Indeed, his time was just 0.088 of a second slower than Damon Hill's time, and very, very close indeed, the top few times today, but a very promising performance once again. Pedro Diniz was the next one in trouble down at the Rascasse, and more damage and bits of carbon fibre littered around the circuit.
I had some problem with the brakes, and I started to play with the balance, and I think I went a bit too far, and it just blocked the rear brakes there, and the car spun off on the turning. And it's a shame because until there I was doing quite good with the old tires, and with the new tires I think I could improve easily more than 1 second, and that puts me in a good position on the grid. So Saturday, I'm looking forward to Saturday. I think we could do a good job on Saturday.
So replay of that one, and as you can see, he hit the barrier pretty hard, very similar to Jos Verstappen's accident, and very much wiping out the rear wing of his Ligier. So Pedro would end up down in 18th position today. The Tyrrells were working hard on race setup today. They've changed their plan a little bit on previous occasions. On the first day, they've worked on a qualifying setup. They found last time out in Imola that it seemed to work better to work on their race setup. And Mika Salo qualified in 8th place. at the last Grand Prix, his best position of the year so far. So similar work done today, and Mika Salo feeling fairly happy with the race setup and also happy about the track having been resurfaced. He felt that the additional grip and lack of bumps were a major advantage this year. Ukyo Katayama was also running quite well, but John Lacey suffered this amazing spin at Massenet coming into Casino Square. He managed somehow to get away with a 360-degree spin coming into that section of track. And a comparison, there you are, of the accidents between Jos Verstappen and Pedro Diniz, and a very similar impact. But poor old Pedro Diniz was flicked back round to wipe off the front wing as well. Back with John Lacey, having survived that moment at the top of this hill, coming into Casino Square, and it didn't seem to slow him down too much. Back end of the car still looking somewhat twitchy in places, and Lacey's fast reactions really having to work hard to cope with the balance of the car. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, saying that he was fairly happy with the way that it had gone. And considering that all of his running was done on old tyres today, he was delighted to be very close to Damon Hill's times. Well, John Lacey's greatest race perhaps here at Monaco was his very first Grand Prix here aboard the Tyrrell, and he finished in second place in 1990. Since then, he's had some other podium finishes. Third place in 91 and in 93, and of course running well last year up until the accident with Martin Brundle. But could this weekend at last be Lacey's chance to really get things together with his new team, Benetton Renault, the winner of this race the last 2 years? Lacey's time at this point, 24.6. And his best time would prove to be a 24.1 eventually, just a couple of tenths of a second slower, about 3/10 of a second slower than Damon Hill's best. Evidence of him trying hard though into Mirabeau, running somewhat wide, tidier through the Lowe's hairpin, and then trying to keep it all under control along the seafront and through the tunnel. Very much one of Lacey's favourite tracks. He comes from not far away, and the mixture of French and Italian in this part of the world, in Monte Carlo, suiting him absolutely down to the ground. And he really looks fired up for a good performance this weekend. Needs to put behind him some of the problems he's been suffering in the last few Grand Prix. Some mistakes, some misfortune have put him under some pressure, there's no doubt about that. Well, this time was not a quick one, but as I say, John Lacey would end up 5th fastest today, 2nd fastest of those who used old tyres, and 2nd fastest to Damon Hill by around 3/10 of a second. So it looks quite promising, the battle between the Williams Renault and Benetton Renaults in qualifying come Saturday. The times at this stage saw Berger up into 2nd place, with Coulthard 3rd, then Hakkinen in 4th position. And Gerhard Berger himself, well, we already heard from him about how he was using old tyres today. I'm pretty satisfied with that. He was only a 1/10 of a second slower than teammate John Lacey, although that was the difference of 4 places, which gives you an idea of just how close the times were today. Berger, a man rather in the newspapers, particularly in the UK, with an alleged incident in Australia with him and Barry Sheen and a young lady, and many questions being asked, but Gerhard keeping fairly quiet about all that and getting on with the job of getting his Benetton Renault dialed in to the street circuit here at Monaco. one of the most experienced competitors here, of course. This will be his 186th Grand Prix this weekend, and his first attempt to race here, 1984, when he was driving for ATS. So plenty of experience for Gerhard Berger. Rubens Barrichello then would end up setting the 4th fastest time today aboard the Jordan Peugeot, and pretty happy with the way things were going. Again, enjoying the resurfaced track with fewer bumps around. Teammate Martin Brundle ending up 8th fastest today, also satisfied with the resurfacing here, but rather frustrated to have been held up so much. And Jacques Villeneuve improving towards the end, moving up to 7th place. He says we used the session to learn the track. It's a very different track here, very difficult, and 30 laps, not that much to really get used to it. Well, you raced here in Formula 3, was that a big help? And he says, well, it was a long time ago, and the Formula 1 cars are much wider. That makes a big difference in terms of driving around here. But isn't it rather like an IndyCar track, he was asked, with the wall so close? He says, well, no, it's really quite different. It's not a wall, it's a barrier here, and also you've got the pavement right next to it, so it's really quite different. Well, Villeneuve moving his way up the order, ending up 7th fastest today, getting a little more used to the track. But somebody who got themselves into a bit of trouble was the Italian Giancarlo Fisichella, a former winner, in fact, of the Formula 3 race here at Monaco, and indeed going very well today up until this moment. He did it on his last lap, so he didn't waste any time, and the damage fairly minor. Exactly the same corner as we'd seen all of those other problems, but he went off slightly differently to the others, going off forwards rather than backwards, and just spearing into the Armco, as he told us a little later on. Well, yeah, I braked a little too late, and on the outside of the track is quite dirty. I got onto the dirty stuff and just slid in, but really no major problem. But the fastest today was Mika Häkkinen aboard the McLaren Mercedes. Mika Häkkinen setting the fastest time towards the end of the session, and this indeed was his best lap. Let's just watch on board and from the sidelines as Mika Häkkinen set the fastest time today. Great performance from the Finn after a couple of difficult races, but straight into the groove here at Monaco, one of his favourite circuits, a circuit where he's qualified in 2nd place in the past, one of his best qualifying performances. That was in 1994, and he looks in fine form to repeat perhaps a front row qualifying position here this weekend if he can keep up this performance. Bear in mind, he used new tyres today, and Damon Hill and the two Benettons did not, and Michael Schumacher didn't get much of a chance to run. Indeed, we didn't really see much of Schumacher out at all in the latter part of the session. He had gearbox problems today, which didn't allow him to select the correct gears. It meant he completed only 21 laps out of the 30 allowed, and rather frustratingly wasn't able to get a chance to do some quick laps at the end of the session. But Mika Häkkinen on that new set of tyres, putting in the best time of the day, the 1 minute 23.762, just a fraction outside it on his next attempt, and a very satisfying result for him. Damon Hill ending up 2nd fastest, and very, very close once again. The gap in the end would be just 39 thousandths of a second. And that time, remember, of Damon Hill set on old tyres, so really enjoying a big advantage once everybody's on even terms.
We have done work, and I've done work to improve the car in many ways, and now I can sit down in the seat, take the steering and drive flat out, and not to think too much about the areas in the car what I was thinking in a couple of Grand Prix, which means now I can concentrate for driving again 100%, and I'm happy with the result. Nevertheless, today I don't think many drivers were out there with the new tires, and I was out there in the new tires. I was able to perform and make a good lap time. But again, it's good to go for tomorrow to relax and then go qualifying on Saturday and see what we get.
How much importance is the new modification on the car?
The car, we have a short wheelbase car which is specially basically made for Monte Carlo circuit and also done for the probably Hungarian track, which is very twisty. And then when we head into Hockenheim or Monza or long speed fast circuits, we probably take our long wheelbase car again. And that's the situation.
The worst point of the track is the corner before Raska's corner, maybe. Many spins.
Oh yeah, it's a very tricky corner, and but it's good because that corner is just the corner where I usually go shopping for my dinner, which means I know the corner very well because I live here in Monaco.
So Mika Häkkinen feeling delighted with the way things went today. Second fastest then Damon Hill, and he was also very happy today, saying that they did a lot of good work and got a lot of work done on the race setup, which of course is important. He said it felt good and he thoroughly enjoyed himself, and of course a driver on top form who's enjoying himself is going to be hard to beat. But what about David Coulthard?
It's very encouraging. You know, today is not the important day, Saturday is the important day, but I think it shows that the new car's working well. Mika and I are very close on the time, so it means we can relate to each other what the car is doing, and it makes Friday much more enjoyable.
So first and third for McLaren Mercedes, and a big smile from David Coulthard as things are looking up and improving. And Norbert Haug also looking pretty happy afterwards, the boss of Mercedes on the motorsport side. Alain Prost, we asked him about it. Remember, he's a technical advisor within the team now. We asked him, working with the two drivers, both so competitive, is that an advantage? And he says, well, yes, it is an advantage. It wasn't the case at the beginning of the season because one driver would be going well, the other would be having a bad weekend, and then it would swap around, and neither of them both had a good time at the same time. But now things are going well, they're both very evenly matched, and that proves how good the car is now. It's definitely made a step forward with two drivers producing similar sort of times. That shows that the equipment is good. We found a good compromise. It's great to have both drivers up there. And so the classification today, the two McLarens well up, but Damon Hill looking very strong again. There's no doubt about that. Rubens Barrichello also looking good. And watch out for John Alesi and Gerhard Berger, both confident on old tyres today. Further down the list, Schumacher limited on his lap, but he also said he was fairly happy with the way things had gone and feels that they will have a good setup come qualifying. Johnny Herbert down in 19th with a tale of disasters today, but hopefully things will go better for him come qualifying day on Saturday. So we've come to the end of this first day here in Monaco, and the weather conditions have improved tremendously. Superb afternoon and a superb day as well for the team that's won here 9 times in the past 12 years, McLaren.
Yes, Ben, the red and whites have finally got a performance which is matching their reputation, particularly on this circuit. And whether it's going to be the same on Saturday afternoon, well, that we're going to have to wait and see. But clearly, the changes to the car in particular, they've shortened the wheelbase here, and that's something that makes the car a little bit more nimble. Häkkinen and Coulthard's confidence must be so high, but don't forget Damon Hill, the man who really has dominated the championship and qualifying so far this year. Come Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, who's going to bet against him being in pole?
But what about Michael Schumacher now? He had problems today. How much will those 9 laps that he wasn't able to do affect his chances?
It's really down to the team whether they can find the speed in the car. Before this session began today, they were confident that Michael Schumacher could be in pole position, that he could win this Grand Prix. Now, some of that confidence may be knocked slightly, but again with Schumacher, we know the man's capable of performing miracles in cars that sometimes are not necessarily the most competitive.
So a day off between this one and the qualifying day, and then the real action will start. So join us then again on Saturday.